Good morning. Welcome to episode 9 of Tea, Coffee, and Torah. I'm so glad to have you guys with me this morning. This morning I really want to discuss some concepts before we dig into the actual evidence from both history and archaeology and the Bible. This morning I have my trusty mug. This mug is a little special. It has some history to it. We got this when we lived in Washington State. We were there when, in the 1980s, when Mount St. Helens blew. And one of my dad's coworkers made this mug from him. And I don't know if you can see it. Let me hold it up here. Do you see all those little specks and freckles in that mug? Well, it's ash from Mount St. Helens, so that's what she used to make this mug. So anyways, I hope you have your cup of joe or your glass of tea and join me. I have really been enjoying your comments and your feedback from this series. I appreciate it, and I would love to hear if there's something you would like to discuss, a concept, maybe something that's troubled you. Let's discuss it. Let's not just ignore it. Let's tackle these issues head on, because ultimately I am wanting to give you the tools to make your faith stronger, but also there may be times that we have to change and adjust the way that we previously saw things to fit the evidence based on new criteria. So join me and we're going to dig right in. One of the things that I find that when we deal with Bible and history is the idea that we come in a lot of times with preconceived ideas, a preconceived mindset as to what that evidence should hold. I'm going to change this just a little bit if I can. You're going to see the rest of my my thing here. I just noticed that. Anyways, I'll just hold it like this. It was just a bad setup this morning. Anyways, one of the things that I find when we come into the Bible, we come in with this mindset that things should be a certain way. And when we get into the evidence, we're kind of baffled when the evidence does not uphold our preconceived ideas. So one of those is the idea that, and this is more of a question, if the Bible has truth, if Noah was real, if Abraham was real, what does that imply for ancient nations and the truth they may have had right after the flood? Should all ancient nations right after the flood have had truth? Should they have never had truth, and truth was completely and totally revealed with Abraham and with Israel at Mount Sinai? Now, why do I say that truth was revealed at Mount Sinai? Well, it's because in the Psalms, and we'll get into this later, David says that the law is truth. So if the law is truth, and Israel had truth, and then you go back in time and you will also find, we're going to get into this later, that Jacob also had truth. Then where does that line divide? Where is that line between the truth Jacob had and Abraham would have had and the laws, the ideas, the theology of ancient nations? What about traditions and customs? If Israel has truth, and, Yahweh says that other nations, as for other nations, they have not known my ways. Well, we take that kind of as an ultimate black and white, like ancient nations had no truth whatsoever. There was there's just no compatibility. Well, what if there are some ideas that ancient nations had? Where does the truth in the error lie? So those are some discussions that I want to have as we continue in this series. Now, when we look at Noah, my perspective and what I've found is that ancient nations originally, right after the flood, everyone would have had truth. Everyone would have known what what was known during the day. So if Noah would have known it, then so would other nations. So a lot of times you have people come in with a very traditional mindset where they think that nobody ever had any truth. And then when they discover, say, the Hammurabi Code, where there's the idea of Talion Laws. And Talion Laws are today what we know as the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth form of judgment, form of justice that is defined in the Torah. Well, when you find other ancient law codes that have this, how then do we decide that, Israel had truth and other nations didn't? One of the things that I looked at in my studies, because many of you know, back in 1999, I had a very strong crisis of faith, and it was really with the evidence. It was what's true, what isn't, where do we draw the line? And one of the things that I found was in the application of those ideas. I hear a lot of critics taking that idea out of context, where they'll take the eye for an eye concept and use it as a very literal, a very little application. So they'll say, well, if you accidentally have negligence where somebody's arm comes off, then your arm has to come off. Well, you find that what that really means and how it's applied in Scripture is that the punishment should fit the crime. Not that, somebody's arm should literally be, removed. And you also find this idea of rectification, where the crime, you are responsible for the crime, for whatever for whatever penalty or whatever negligence you cause, you are responsible for making that person whole. So with this concept, what does it mean? Why is there an issue if other nations would also have had concepts of justice, where they try to live by a moral life? What I find is that originally a lot of ancient nations had truth, but what you find as that history progresses is that they begin to lose those ideas. Other ideologies begin to creep in. And then you find that their application of this whole idea of justice, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, it's not where the penalty fits the crime, but you find that they're egregious penalties. For instance, Torah really doesn't distinguish between crimes against the state, which would have been maybe against the priesthood, or against an individual. You really find that pretty much if somebody commits a crime, the restoration is 5 to 6 times the amount of the damages. And that's really kind of universal. When you compare that with the Hammurabi Code, crimes against the state were egregious. It could result in death. Other times it resulted in 20 times the repayment. So there is an actual difference in the application of those concepts. You also find ideas that some of the stories that we have in Scripture, for instance, the story of Job, which is key to understanding the suffering servant, was well known in other ancient cultures, not by the name of Job, but by other names. And we're going to get into that through this series. So I want to hear in this your thoughts, your comments regarding ancient stories, regarding their parallels in other societies. What are some things that you have come across that you either find troubling, or things that you have found that you were just blown away with the evidence, something that just made it come alive? Please share with me the things that you have learned. I would love to hear from your studies. I find that most of my friends on Facebook, most of the people that I interact with, that very well educated, know the evidence, and each of you have something very, very valuable to share that I would love to hear. So please, in your comments below, just share some of the ideas that you've learned, parallels maybe with other nations, and I'd like to discuss those. Now, next time, and I am keeping it short today because I just want to kind of do an overview with truth in ancient nations and what they may have had originally. And we are going to see, as we continue this series, a definite dividing line between the Torah that Yahweh gave Israel and that which was known among other nations. Sometimes, again, like the Talion Laws, you find that the concepts may be shared with other nations, but then you find how they are applied is very different. We're going to see that some of the stories are parallel. Here's a question for you. Almost every ancient nation has a story of a Garden of Eden, of a man and a woman and a serpent. Does that make the biblical account folklore? The flood. Almost every ancient nation has an account of a flood. Does that make what's in Genesis folklore? So I want to hear your opinions on this. I want to hear what you have struggled, the conclusions you come away with, and we'll keep discussing this next time on Coffee, Tea, and Torah. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I look forward to learning and growing with you. Have a wonderful day.